One of four screenings I saw that day. First, I viewed Germany Year Zero in the morning, a way to start a morning indeed, and then the 400 Blows at the Art Gallery, followed by Haneke's Caché, and then a projection of De Palma's Blowout. I've discussed 400 Blows and Blowout on this channel before. We just briefly looked over Germany Year Zero. Let's have a little discussion on Caché and Haneke in general. It could be said, and sometimes is, that Caché is Haneke's finest film, and I think I would agree, although I am strongly considering The Seventh Continent as that picture, potentially. In any instance, Caché is certainly one of Haneke's most arresting, compelling films, and also one of the most stimulating and captivating films of the 2000s. I would compare it possibly in terms of how rewatchable and beguiling it is to the likes of Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire, Michael Almereyda's Happy Here and Now, a very brilliant and quite underrated film, London Orbital from 2002, which you should attempt to see if it ever becomes more widely available anyway, Reference Sphere X, maybe the man's finest work, Ghost in the Shell 2 from Oshii, or Naoki Kato's Abawa Q, which in a way showed Haneke how it is done, at least where the displays of ultra-violence are concerned. Fortunately for Caché and for us, Haneke does not just rely on repulsing the audience with unimpressive simulations of traumatic abuse and sadism. He explores the concept of surveillance, the emergence of repressed pathos, the banality of contemporary Western European, even French, lifestyle and culture, and the psychological ramifications of an exposure to violence after the matter, rather than reveling in the limited time the victim has left before they are ultimately extinguished. I have no issue claiming that Haneke holds genius, although I think some of his films had profane priorities and had no justification in even existing. Not that they ought to have been censored, I don't accept that, I don't believe in it, although it is simply not impressive cinema. Simulating such a universally undesirable torture is not a revelatory achievement. You know which two films of his I am referring to. I also have some reservations about 2004's The Piano, although a piano teacher, excuse me, though I can see it has strengths which certain Last House on the Left slash Salo homages do not, and I always felt as though, as much as I admire Haneke and think he is wholly brilliant, I never saw what that I never thought that the White Ribbon was as good as everyone says it is. Fine film, fine enough, but he has at least 10 superior films, 10 rather superior films, I would claim. If you want to pretend to find merit in a certain late 90s film and its remake for some cute shock value, or wanting to see more interesting, edgy, which is superior to the average person, I'll hear you out, but I do have contempt for you inherently, though I won't let that stop me from reading what you might have to say. I remember when I first saw it, Caché. I watched it on a laptop on my bed when I was 17 or 18. I couldn't get the file to play on whatever particular device was attached to a couple of televisions, and at that time I didn't have an adapter for that laptop, a MacBook. I'll never purchase one ever again if I can help it. It wasn't the best way to view Caché, but I did appreciate the film. I was unsure how brilliant I thought the film was, but I found the premise fascinating, some of the execution bewitching, and certain scenes and moments to be completely unforgettable. However, it didn't necessarily wow me as it began to in the years subsequent to my first viewing it. I don't know if I ever saw it again between that first time and just this Sunday past, or as I began to watch more of Haneke's films and really fell in love with some of them, as well as began to consider, and did, putting some of my own films together, it dawned on me that I felt as though Caché was an act of utter compositional genius, if nothing else, and if entranced in the film, the atmosphere of the piece is magnetic. There is not much like it in terms of conjuring sheer mood for the cinema. A cinema may be a more apt place to view this film, or at least on a television screen, at least 4 times the size of a laptop screen, and whilst at its bare bones it could be accused of a film with a gimmick, a premise and a willingness to keep you hanging, whilst enthralling you with the prospect of a resolution all the way, the headspace that the film twists you in is one of the most distinct and enrapturing of the 21st century thus far, and being in the cinema, and a little crowd, viewing the film was an and with a little crowd, viewing the film was an experience I can remember forever, reminding me of what a truly transfixing film can do, and how much consideration has to go into one of these things. Yikes, I feel pretty intimidated, better up the ante on that prospective next project. If you haven't seen it yet, you're really missing out. I think this is a decent place to start with Haneke. I started with this one and I'm a great admirer of the guy, not without reservations, as I said earlier, though probably one of the more impressive films I've discussed so far on the FOTD program. I'm more considering this from a clinical compositional point of view, although in sheer watchability, I'd challenge you not to be engaged when viewing this film in the right circumstances. Its sardonic assessment of contemporary France and of public intellectuals akin to Henry Levy, Finkelkraut, or Welbeck, the skeletons in her closet, and its examination of the somewhat end of history pathology which Europeans, or at least certainly Western Europeans, seemingly were so desperate to enable, and who could blame them, and yet it can't help but entail the placing of heads into sands, a topic explored across much of Haneke's feature film works. I can imagine this film coming under criticism for not doing quite enough to engage the viewer beyond appealing to an intellectual appraisal from university-educated critics. That's fine, that's one's prerogative, but as a hack filmmaker, I look at this thing and I think, Haneke, you bastard, I'm going to have to work a lot harder to abate my insecurities now. Oh, and I'm considering contacting the cinema wherein I saw this film, the Golden Age Cinema in Surrey Hills, Sydney, as they are holding a little Haneke retrospective at this time, and recommend that they place everyone who purchases a ticket to either of the Funny Games screenings, very sadly I believe that they are screening both, on a list and send that list to the police. I'm not even kidding. I don't trust you people. I assume I won't like you people. Stay the fuck away from me. Stay the fuck away from other people and their families. Go seek out professional help, and if you're so desperate to impress a clique that you'd pretend to appreciate a display of behaviour you'd otherwise purport to abhor, as any participant in society is prone and ought to do, then you might be psychologically broken and no talk therapy can help you, only a strict medication regimen, and you did this to yourself. I'm only half joking. Have a good look at yourselves. For the rest of you, the saner of you, I wish you great peace and happiness, and the others, well, also peace and happiness, but your idea of peace and happiness might not be very compatible with a safe society, so I would hesitate to wish that upon you unequivocally. If he ever directs another feature, Happy End was his most recent in 2017, I'll be purchasing a ticket, unless it is Funny Games free, God forbid that. Though if he wants to simply retire, deeming he has done enough for the medium, I feel as though that is entirely acceptable because he would be right. He has done enough for the medium, for better or for worse.